It was a stormy night in Dublin. The kind where the rain lashes against the windows like it's trying to break in, and the wind howls through the narrow streets of the Georgian Quarter. I remember it vividly because that's when everything shattered for me. I was huddled in the corner of our family drawing room during a wake for my husband's great-uncle, a pint of Guinness in hand, trying to drown out the chatter of relatives swapping old stories about the O'Brien publishing legacy. My phone buzzed in my pocket, and when I pulled it out, my heart dropped. There, on the screen, was a notification from the App Store, a new release under the O'Brien imprint that looked exactly like my prototype storytelling app. It wasn't just similar, it was mine. Down to the interactive folklore features I'd slaved over for months. My code, my ideas, stolen and slapped with their leather-bound branding. I felt a chill run down my spine, colder than the Irish drizzle outside. How could this happen? And then it hit me like a thunderclap. This wasn't some random hack. This was an inside job. And the prime suspect was staring at me from across the room, my mother-in-law, Fiona O'Brien, with her smug smile and her endless disdain for anything digital. Let me back up a bit and tell you how I got here. My name is Nora Kelly, and I'm originally from Cork, down in the south where the hills roll green and the air smells like fresh rain on peat. I grew up tinkering with computers in my dad's shed, teaching myself to code on an old laptop that wheezed like it was on its last breath. By the time I hit my early 20s, I'd moved to Dublin, chasing the buzz of the tech scene in Silicon Docks. That's where the magic happens, startups popping up like mushrooms after rain, blending old Irish myths with cutting-edge apps. I developed this passion for digital storytelling, creating tools that let people weave interactive tales inspired by leprechaun lore and ancient Celtic legends, but with a modern twist, augmented reality overlays, voice-activated narratives. The works. It was my baby. My way of honoring the old while embracing the new. That's when I met Eamon O'Brien. He was charming, with that easy Irish grin and a love for books that matched my love for bites. He came from this storied family. The O'Briens had been in publishing for generations, printing everything from poetry collections to historical tomes in their creaky old press house on the outskirts of the city. Eamon was the heir apparent. But he wasn't stuffy about it. He saw the future in hybrid models, blending print with pixels. We hit it off at a pub trivia night, bonding over obscure facts about Irish folklore. Before long, we were dating, then engaged, and finally married in a small ceremony overlooking the Liffey River. It felt like a fairy tale. Until I met his mother. Fiona O'Brien was a force of nature. Or maybe more like a storm cloud that never quite dissipates. She was in her late 50s, with sharp features and a wardrobe full of tweed skirts and sensible shoes. The epitome of a conservative editor who lived and breathed ink on paper. From the moment Eamon introduced me, she sized me up like I was a typo in one of her manuscripts.
An app developer from Cork? Strange. But real stories, my dear, they're bound in leather, not flashing on those lifeless screens.
She'd go on about how digital media was eroding the soul of literature, how kids these days were losing the tactile joy of turning pages. I tried to brush it off at first, family dynamics, right? But it escalated quickly. Our wedding was just the start. Fiona made snide comments during the reception, whispering to relatives about how my gadgets would never replace a good hardcover. Eamon defended me, but she had this way of planting seeds of doubt. When we moved into the family home, a grand Georgian townhouse with high ceilings and drafty halls, she'd accidentally unplug my workstation or misplace my external drives. Little things, but they added up. I chalked it up to generational clash. She prized tradition. I chased innovation. But then came the real sabotage. It began subtly. Right after I started beta testing my app, I'd recruited a handful of testers' friends from the tech community, a few folklore enthusiasts from online forums. They were excited, giving feedback on features like the interactive map that let users hunt for virtual leprechauns in Dublin's parks. but one by one, they dropped out. "Sorry, Nora. Something came up," they'd text. Vague and evasive. I dug a little and found out Fiona had been reaching out to them, offering incentives, free copies of rare O'Brien editions, invitations to exclusive literary events, even cash bribes disguised as research grants. One tester confessed over coffee. She said your app was a gimmick, that real storytelling needed the weight of paper, and honestly, the bribe was too good to pass up. I was furious, but I kept it to myself, not wanting to rock the boat with Eamon. Then the bugs started appearing. I'd demo the app at local tech meetups, and midway through, it'd crash spectacularly, screens freezing, data corrupting, error messages popping up like digital gremlins. At first, I thought it was my coding. I'd stay up nights debugging, combing through lines of Python and JavaScript, but the issues were too targeted, too malicious. Someone was planting malware, subtle injections that triggered only during presentations. I traced the first one to a shared family network. The O'Briens had this old Wi-Fi set up in the house. Passwords handed down like heirlooms. Fiona's laptop was ancient, a relic from the early aughts. But she used it for everything: editing manuscripts, managing the company's finances. She'd hover near my office, pretending to dust or fetch tea, but I caught her glancing at my screens more than once. The tension built like a pressure cooker. Family dinners became battlegrounds. Fiona would steer conversations to the decline of print, quoting stats about ebook sales dipping while physical books held steady. "See, Nora? People crave the real thing," she'd say, her eyes gleaming with triumph. Eamon tried to mediate, but he was caught in the middle, loyal to his mom, but supportive of my work. I'd bite my tongue, smiling through gritted teeth. But inside, I was seething. My app was more than a project. It was my vision for bridging worlds, turning Irish myths into immersive experiences for a global audience. And here was this woman, undermining me at every turn, all because she couldn't let go of her precious leather bounds. The peak of her treachery came just before that fateful wake. I'd been gearing up for a market launch, polishing the prototype to perfection. One evening, after a long day coding, I left my laptop connected to the home network. Stupid mistake. In hindsight, the next morning, anomalies, files accessed remotely, timestamps altered. I didn't think much of it until the App Store alert hit during the wake. There it was, O'Brien Folklore Tales. A blatant ripoff, released under their imprint. They'd even poached my beta testers' feedback to refine it, adding features I'd discussed in family chats. My stomach churned as I scrolled through the reviews, praise for the innovative blend of tradition and tech. Words that should have been mine. I excused myself from the drawing room, slipping into the study where Fiona kept her laptop. The rain pounded outside, thunder rumbling like an omen. I wasn't a hacker by trade, but I'd picked up enough cybersecurity basics from tech forums. Logging in was easy. Her password was predictable: O'Brien Press, no two-factor, no encryption. What I found chilled me. Traces of my code on her drive, emails to printers about rushing the launch, and worse, logs showing she'd used a simple phishing tool to breach my prototype. She'd exploited the family network, slipping in like a digital ghost. But as I dug deeper, I uncovered something bigger: cryptocurrency transactions, wallets siphoning funds from the company accounts, embezzlement, hidden in blockchain shadows. That night, as the wake wound down and relatives stumbled home through the storm, I confronted her privately. But wait, that's jumping ahead. Let me tell you about the build-up, the little details that made it all so real, so painfully tangible. The way her eyes narrowed when I'd talk about app metrics, user engagement, download projections. How she'd help by suggesting I incorporate more authentic elements, only to twist them in her version. The smell of her perfume lingering in my office after she'd borrowed a charger. It was psychological warfare, wrapped in familial politeness. By then, I'd started documenting everything: screenshots of crashes, emails from defecting testers, network logs. I confided in a friend at a cybersecurity firm, who confirmed the malware signatures matched free tools anyone could download. Fiona wasn't a tech whiz, but she was cunning, enlisting a nephew with IT skills to do the dirty work. Piece by piece, the puzzle formed, her fear that my success would eclipse the O'Brien dynasty, pushing them into obsolescence. She saw me as a threat, a code-cracking witch invading her realm. As the rain eased that night, I sat in the dim light of the study, heart pounding, realizing this wasn't just about my app, it was about power, legacy, and the clash of eras. I had to fight back, not with words, but with evidence. Little did I know, the storm was just beginning. As the rain tapered off that night, leaving the streets slick and glistening under the street lamps, I stayed glued to that ancient laptop screen in the study, my fingers flying across the keys like they had a mind of their own. The wake's murmurs faded into the background, relatives clinking glasses, sharing laughs over old family yarns, while I dove deeper into the digital rabbit hole Fiona had unwittingly opened. My pulse raced, a mix of anger and adrenaline fueling me. This wasn't just petty sabotage anymore, it was a full-blown betrayal, and I needed proof solid enough to bury her schemes. I started by isolating the malware traces I'd spotted earlier. It was crude stuff, probably downloaded from some shady online forum, a basic keylogger wrapped in a Trojan horse, designed to snag files and send them packing over the network. Reverse engineering it took hours, but I'd honed those skills back in Cork, messing with open-source code on rainy weekends. I unpacked the binary layer by layer, using tools like IDA Pro that I'd installed on my own machine for just such emergencies. The code revealed injection points tied to our home Wi-Fi, timestamps matching times when Fiona was alone in the house. But the real goldmine was the outbound connections, packets funneled to an external server, then bounced through a VPN to obscure the trail. I didn't stop there. Fueled by black coffee from the kitchen, Eamon had crashed early. Assuming I was just working late again, I cross-referenced the logs with her email archives. There they were, messages to a shady contact. Some nephew twice removed with a sketchy IT background, instructing him on how to deploy the bug, make it look accidental. She'd written, like one of those glitches in her soulless code. My blood boiled reading that. Her words echoing the snide remarks she'd thrown at me over Sunday roasts. But digging further, I hit the embezzlement vein. Hidden in her browser history were links to cryptocurrency exchanges, Bitcoin wallets, Ethereum addresses, the works. She'd been siphoning funds from the O'Brien publishing accounts. Small amounts at first to avoid red flags. Then bolder transfers disguised as vendor payments for fictional suppliers. I traced one wallet to a series of transactions totaling what must have been hundreds of thousands in euros. Converted to dollars for anonymity on offshore platforms. It was sloppy. She hadn't even enabled multi-signature security, relying on that outdated laptop's firewall like it was a fortress. The next morning broke gray and foggy. Dublin's typical hangover after a storm. I slipped out early, telling Eamon I had a meeting in Silicon Docks. But really? I headed to a quiet cafe in Temple Bar, away from prying eyes. There, nursing a flat white. I pieced together the timeline. Fiona's meddling hadn't started with me. Company records I'd accessed showed discrepancies going back years, overstated expenses. Ghost employees on the payroll. She was funding her lavish lifestyle, trips to literary festivals in Edinburgh, antique book auctions in London, all while the press teetered on outdated tech. My app's success threatened to expose it all, shining a light on how she'd resisted modernization to keep her grip on the purse strings. I felt a pang of sympathy for Eamon. He'd idolized her, seeing her as the guardian of the family legacy. But this was corruption. Plain and simple. Over the following days, I turned detective in my own home. Careful not to tip my hand. I'd smile at breakfast, passing the marmalade while secretly monitoring network traffic with Wireshark on my laptop. Fiona noticed nothing, too busy gloating over her new release. She'd even had the gall to show it off at a family lunch, holding up her phone like a trophy. See? This is how you honor our heritage properly branded, not some fly-by-night gadget. Eamon beamed, oblivious, but I caught the flicker in her eyes, daring me to challenge her. I didn't. Instead, I gathered more evidence. One evening, while she was out at a book club meeting discussing some dusty Victorian novel, no doubt I cloned her hard drive using a bootable USB I'd prepared. It was risky, heart-thumping stuff. But the data was damning. Spreadsheets with cooked books, emails to accountants pleading for creative accounting, and tied to it all, the crypto wallets, with transactions linked to luxury purchases, a vintage typewriter from Sotheby's, a weekend in a 5-star spa in Killarney. As the fog of suspicion cleared in my mind, I realized this went beyond personal vendetta. Fiona's actions could sink the entire dynasty if exposed improperly. I confided in a trusted friend from my Cork days, now a cybersecurity analyst in Belfast. Over a encrypted video call, he walked me through verifying the blockchain trails. "Nora, this is textbook embezzlement," he said, his voice low. "You've got timestamps. IP logs, it's airtight." He suggested anonymizing the data before going public, using tools like Tor to mask my involvement. I spent nights in my home office, the glow of dual monitors casting shadows on the walls, scrubbing metadata and compiling a dossier. It included screenshots of the plagiarized app code, side-by-side comparisons showing identical functions, down to variable names I'd whimsically chosen, like leprechaun loot for in-app rewards. The malware reversal revealed her nephew's digital fingerprints, his sloppy comments in the code like Aunt Fi's special sauce. But the human element hit hardest. I overheard Fiona on the phone one afternoon, pacing the garden while I napped upstairs. "Yes, the funds are secure, invested wisely," she murmured, her tone smug. It twisted my gut. This wasn't just about money or my app. It was about trust shattered. A family poisoned from within. Eamon started noticing my distance late nights. Whispered calls. "Everything all right?" "Love?" he'd ask, his hand on my shoulder. I'd nod, forcing a smile. But the weight grew. I debated confronting her directly, imagining the scene, storming into her study, flinging printouts like confetti. But no, that'd give her time to cover tracks. Instead, I reached out to an investigative journalist at the Irish Times, a contact from a tech conference. Her name was Siobhan Murphy, sharp as a tack with a reputation for exposing corporate rot. I sent an anonymous tip first. A teaser email with redacted snippets. "Interested in a publishing scandal?" I wrote, attaching a blurred image of the crypto ledger. Siobhan bit hard. We met in a nondescript pub off Grafton Street. Rain pattering on the windows again, Dublin's eternal soundtrack. I wore a hoodie, paranoia high, but she put me at ease with her no-nonsense vibe. "This is explosive," she said, scanning the full dossier I'd brought on a USB. "Embezzlement tied to IP theft? It'll make waves." We pored over details for hours, how Fiona's bribes to my beta testers were funneled through petty cash, receipts I'd photographed, the app's launch timing, coinciding with her largest crypto dump. Siobhan cross-checked with her sources, confirming the O'Brien Press's financial woes layoffs whispered about in industry circles. "She's been propping it up with smoke and mirrors," Siobhan noted. I nodded, relief mixing with dread. This would hurt Eamon. But truth had to out. The investigation ramped up from there. Siobhan's team dug into public records, uncovering audits that Fiona had delayed, board meetings where she'd vetoed digital initiatives, I provided more anonymously network diagrams showing the hack's path. Reverse-engineered code snippets proving intent. It felt like building a case in a courtroom drama. But real, with stakes that kept me awake. One night, a false alarm, Fiona rummaged in the study, muttering about lost files. I froze in bed, heart hammering. But she found nothing. I'd wiped my traces clean. The guilt gnawed. Though, was I becoming like her? Sneaky and shadowed? No. I told myself this was justice, not vengeance. Weeks blurred into a tense routine, code by day, sleuth by night. Eamon grew suspicious. Our conversations strained. You're distant. Nora, is it the app? He'd probe over dinner. I'd deflect, blaming deadlines. But the lie sat heavy. Fiona, meanwhile, basked in her stolen glory. The app garnered reviews. Sales trickling in. She hosted a launch party at the press house, toasting innovation under the O'Brien banner. I attended, bile rising, watching her schmooze investors. But inside, I knew the endgame approached. Siobhan's article was shaping up. Drafts shared via secure drop. We've got corroboration from a former employee, she messaged. Fiona's nephew flipped, admitted the hack for a plea deal. The climax built slowly, like a wave gathering offshore. I funneled the last pieces, wallet addresses linked to her personal bank, timestamps syncing with company withdrawals. Siobhan promised anonymity, but I braced for fallout. As publication loomed, the house felt charged. Fiona's smugness cracking slightly, perhaps sensing the noose. One evening, over tea, she eyed me oddly. You've been quiet, dear. Plotting your next pixelated folly? Her laugh was forced. I smiled thinly, clinking my cup. Little did she know. The storm she'd unleashed was about to break wide open. The day the article dropped, Dublin woke to headlines screaming scandal. Publishing heir's mother embroiled in theft and fraud. Blared the Irish Times front page. I feigned shock at breakfast, Eamon's face paling as he read. Fiona stormed in, paper clutched like a weapon. Lies, all lies, she shrieked. But the evidence was their quotes from insiders. Blockchain trails exposed. Auditors descended. Police inquiries followed. The app was pulled. Credits restored to me amid the chaos. Eamon confronted her, tears in his eyes. The family rift raw and real. In the rain-lashed drawing room that evening, as thunder rolled anew, Fiona cornered me. You've poisoned the well. You code-cracking witch, she spat. Face twisted. I stood tall, pint in hand from the minibar. Slanta to transparency. Ma. No more shadows in the story. She faded after that, ousted from the board, audited to oblivion, retreating to some quiet cottage in the countryside. The dynasty shifted under my guidance, blending apps with prints in a hybrid empire. Interactive folklore thrived, honoring the old while embracing the new. It wasn't easy. Rebuilding trust with Eamon took time. Therapy sessions in cozy Dublin offices, but we emerged stronger. Looking back, that stormy wake was the spark. The rest? A testament to fighting fire with code. After the dust settled from that explosive article in the Irish Times, life in the O'Brien household transformed into something resembling a battlefield cleanup, messy, emotional, and full of unexpected revelations. Eamon was devastated, pacing the creaky wooden floors of our Georgian townhouse for days, his face etched with betrayal. He'd always seen his mother as the unyielding pillar of the family business, the one who kept the presses running through economic slumps and shifting reader tastes. Now, with auditors swarming the press house like bees on honey, he had to confront the ugly truth. Fiona hadn't just targeted me, she'd been eroding the foundation of everything he held dear. I remember one particularly raw evening. Rain drumming steadily on the roof again. Dublin's weather seemed to mirror our moods. Eamon slumped in the armchair by the fireplace, a tumbler of whiskey in hand, staring into the flames. How could she do this? Nora? To us? To the legacy? His voice cracked, and I knelt beside him, wrapping my arms around his shoulders. It was the first time I'd seen him cry. Not dramatic sobs, but quiet tears that spoke volumes about the fracture in his world. I didn't gloat. Victory tasted bittersweet. Instead, I focused on rebuilding. The scandal rippled through Dublin's literary circles like a stone in a pond. Whispers at pubs turned to outright discussions, old editors shaking their heads over pints. Young writers buzzing on social media about the fall of the O'Brien matriarch. Fiona didn't go quietly. She lawyered up, hiring a slick solicitor from a firm in the financial district, claiming the evidence was fabricated, that I'd orchestrated a digital smear campaign out of jealousy. Her accusations flew in press statements, painting me as the interloper from Cork who couldn't handle tradition. But the facts held firm. The blockchain transactions were irrefutable. Public ledgers that no amount of spin could erase. Auditors uncovered more. Inflated invoices for printing supplies that never arrived. Diverted royalties from best-selling authors funneled into her personal accounts. One author, a renowned historian who'd trusted the O'Briens for decades, went public with his own grievances, adding fuel to the fire. In the midst of the chaos, I threw myself into salvaging the business. Eamon, once the reluctant heir, stepped up as interim CEO, and I became his unofficial tech advisor. We held emergency meetings in the press house's boardroom, a stuffy space lined with dusty bookshelves and faded portraits of O'Brien ancestors. The staff loyal printers, editors, and marketers who'd weathered Fiona's iron rule were shell-shocked but relieved. About time someone dragged us into the 21st century. One grizzled press operator muttered during a coffee break, clapping me on the back. I outlined a hybrid model, digitized the back catalog, turning classic Irish tales into interactive ebooks with augmented reality features. Imagine scanning a physical book with your phone to unlock hidden animations of banshees wailing or fairies dancing, my app's core idea. Now amplified for the entire imprint. Implementation wasn't smooth. We faced technical hurdles, like migrating ancient databases from floppy disks. Yes, they still had those to cloud servers. I spent long afternoons in the basement archives, dust tickling my nose, scanning brittle pages with high-res scanners while Eamon negotiated with vendors for new software licenses. One vendor, a startup from Belfast specializing in AI-driven content enhancement, became our lifeline. Their tools analyzed text for folklore patterns, suggesting interactive elements like choose-your-own-adventure branches based on Celtic myths. We tested prototypes on a small team, iterating based on feedback, adjusting UI for older readers who preferred larger fonts, optimizing for mobile devices common in rural Ireland. The first hybrid release was a folklore anthology, physical copies bundled with QR codes linking to my app's immersive experiences. Sales trickled in at first, then surged as reviews praised the seamless blend of old and new. Personal healing took longer. Eamon and I attended couples counseling in a cozy office near St. Stephen's Green, where a therapist with a gentle brogue helped us unpack the layers. Trust was broken, but it can be mended, she'd say, guiding us through exercises on communication. I shared my fears of being seen as the villain, of losing Eamon to resentment. He admitted his blind spots, how he'd dismissed my early complaints about Fiona as overreactions. Those sessions strengthened us, turning raw wounds into scars that told a story of resilience. Weekends became our sanctuary, walks through Phoenix Park, hand in hand, watching deer graze under emerald canopies, or pub crawls in Temple Bar where we'd laugh about lighter times. Fiona's fade into obscurity wasn't immediate. She fought the audits tooth and nail, dragging proceedings into months of legal wrangling. Court dates in the Four Courts building became spectacles. Reporters camped outside, snapping photos as she arrived in her tweed coat. Chin high. But evidence mounted. Forensic accountants traced every penny, revealing a web of offshore accounts in places like the Cayman Islands. Her nephew, the IT accomplice, turned state's evidence for a reduced sentence, spilling details of late-night coding sessions in her study. He described her directives: make it crash spectacularly, but untraceable. The judge, a stern woman with a no-nonsense demeanor, handed down a ruling fines hefty enough to wipe out her savings, community service at a local library, and a ban from any executive role in publishing. She retreated to a modest cottage in Wicklow Mountains, far from Dublin's hustle, where rumors said she spent days reading paperbacks by the fire. Isolated from the world she'd once dominated, with her gone, opportunities blossomed. I expanded my app into a full platform, partnering with Irish schools to integrate folklore education, kids using tablets to explore myths interactively, teachers raving about engagement spikes. One pilot program in Cork, my hometown, felt poetic. Students from my old primary school beta testing features, their feedback shaping updates. We hosted launch events, blending tech demos with traditional Sealy dances, fiddles playing as screens lit up with virtual leprechauns. Media coverage shifted from scandal to success, features in tech magazines highlighting our Phoenix rise, interviews where Eamon and I tag-teamed, him touting the literary heritage, me diving into the code wizardry. Challenges persisted, keeping things dynamic. Competitors eyed our hybrid model, attempting knockoffs, sleek apps from London firms mimicking our AR overlays. We countered with patents, filing paperwork in stuffy solicitor offices, protecting innovations like our proprietary Mythweaver algorithm that generated personalized stories based on user inputs. Supply chain issues hit too: paper shortages from global disruptions, forcing us to pivot harder to digital, accelerating our transition. I hired a small dev team, young coders from Trinity College, turning our home office into a buzzing hub of laptops and whiteboards scrawled with flowcharts. Eamon and I dreamed bigger: international expansion. We targeted the US market, adapting content for Irish-American audiences, apps featuring diaspora tales, from Boston pubs to Chicago parades. A trip to New York for a publishing conference sealed deals, booths where attendees scanned demos, eyes widening at holographic fairies projected via phones. Back home, we celebrated milestones with quiet dinners, candlelit tables in our drawing room, toasting with Guinness to new chapters. Our relationship deepened. Intimacy reborn from adversity, lazy mornings in bed, discussing features over tea, or spontaneous drives to coastal cliffs where waves crashed like applause. Years later, well, months, really, but it felt eternal. The O'Brien empire stood transformed. Revenues climbed, blending print sales with app subscriptions, a testament to fusion over feud. I reflected often on that stormy wake, the pivot point where betrayal birthed triumph. No more shadows. Indeed, transparency lit our path, and as Dublin's tech scene thrived around us, Silicon Docks humming with innovation, I knew we'd not just survived, we'd reinvented. The end? Not quite. Stories like ours evolve, page by digital page,